our top story, some big news on the global trade front in the last week or so as the United States announced several measures relative to imports into the United States. It's a big deal on its own, and certainly the consequences of what happens after that could be an even bigger deal. We'd like to understand really what happened, what's the impact, and what shippers should think about going forward. We have a great expert with us here today. Her name is Suzanne Richer. She's a director in the Global Trade Advisory Practice at Amber Road, of course, a well-known global trade management solutions provider. Suzanne, thanks for joining us today on the Supply Chain Television channel.
Thank you, Dan, for the opportunity to join you today to discuss these latest updates on tariff increases for the solar panels imported from China, as well as the increase on duties on washing machines.
Yeah, what really happened here? I mean, there's been a lot of news, but give us a little detail. What actions were really taken?
Well, in a nutshell, the recommendation came from the United States International Trade Commission, and that's what led President Trump's move to add a 30% tariff on solar cells and up to 50% on importing washing machines. So when we look at the tariffs on the solar cells, currently, the call is to at least have those decrease over a 4-year period. And the president is actually using something called a Section 201 to accomplish this. And that Section 201 is part of our Trade Act of 1974, which permits the president to really grant temporary import relief. And he does that by raising import duties or imposing non-tariff barriers, for example, on goods that enter the United States. Anything that could injure or threaten a domestic industry that produces these same goods. So I think it's important to also acknowledge at this point, this is an incredible industry. It was estimated to be $65 billion in U.S. dollars in 2015, and it's expected to grow to $140 billion by 2023. So the impact is great. And I think, too, what's also interesting about this is that we're really mimicking or mirroring what's been taking place also in the European Union. For example, they had very strong competition from these same low-priced imports on solar panels, and they placed a minimum import duty for those cells that prices them up to 30% above market value. So you're seeing a similar effort in the EU, although I do need to mention that only recently in January they are voting to restrict some of those increases. So we saw the same action taking place last year in the European Union, and we're going to see some similar reductions over time that we're also considering.
Okay, very good. Well, geez, there's a lot going on in this area, that's for sure. What do you think the impact of this is going to be, and is it going to be significant?
Well, I think the impact is going to be significant because it calls out the United States in a couple of different arenas. And, of course, there's divergent points of view. For those who support the America First ideology, they're looking to support job retention in the United States, and many consider this a move long overdue. And I think historically, if you look at the trend, let's say, for example, in the Midwest, a great promoter of this is Mike Huckleberry. He was formerly a restaurant owner in Greenville, Michigan. And in Greenville, Michigan, they had a number of different manufacturing sites that continued to move jobs out of the state over a period of time. And that led him to become a Democratic politician in 2008. He has since returned to the private industry, but this is something where he's coming back into play and promoting, and even as a Democrat, promoting President Trump's position on this. And so I think you're going to see a lot of similar ideology expressed throughout those states that have been impacted by jobs moving out of the state. And of course, on the flip side of the coin, I think we have to also look at, is this triggering a trade war, or is this going to be something that causes us to have additional disputes filed against us through the World Trade Organization, who are going to seek, obviously, to overturn this decision. So when you look at the opponents, they have pointed out that really only 10% of solar imports actually currently come directly from China. So the majority of these imports today are coming from factories in Korea, as well as other countries in Southeast Asia, although several are run by Chinese companies. So I think the thing to look for is, while the administration fact sheet is centered on China, it's really not the only country affected by the Section 201 trade case. And then we have to look at, is this going to be intended to apply globally? Because the current fact sheet released by the administration makes no mention of tariff exemption for specific countries or for any specific company. So our U.S. trade representative actually issued a statement that he's going to engage in additional negotiations which could potentially lead to tariff exclusions or changes for certain parties. And I think this was first reported by GTM. So we're going to see how this plays out. Obviously, again, two different divergent points of view, a lot of things happening in a very short period of time, and it might take a couple of weeks for this to truly unfold so we can see where the impact's going to be.
Yeah, it's crazy times. We're here in Ohio with the largest, I think, appliance plant in the world by Whirlpool up in the Findlay, Ohio area, and our Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown is 100% behind this action. And then you've got in Louisville, you've got Chinese company Haier, I think you would say it, that bought GE's appliance business, so their operations here in the United States are actually going to benefit. So it's a topsy-turvy world in the trade, that's for sure. So in the end of the day, you know, what do shippers, importers, exporters, et cetera, what do they need to be doing?
Well, I think they really need to be prepared, and we're looking really at a time with the great pivot and all these different trade regulations. So you need to be educated. There's a multitude of changes taking place. I think companies, trade compliance teams, their legal teams, as well as purchasing and supply chain personnel should really be aware of these changes. And then more importantly, how are they going to impact your company? Because this could involve not only solar panels and cells, it could potentially involve components of those two product lines. So that impact could be very sudden, and firms need to be able to manage these changes. So that would involve, first and foremost, looking at the impact of additional tariffs. Do you have automation that's going to allow you to determine what the impact on your landed cost will be? How is this going to impact pricing in the market that may have already been negotiated? So all of these things require companies to really be dynamic in the way they manage these changes, and again, how they work with their customers to put these costs forward.
Okay, very good. Well, is a trade war coming? That really remains to be seen, and all of this, as you say, is going to have a huge impact on the supply chain decisions. I could talk about this all day, Suzanne, but it's been some great insights. Thanks again for joining us today on the Supply Chain Television channel.
Thank you, Dan.